and sometimes when I do talk, there's this V thing, but I would just like to present on the natural world, because that is really where I'm coming from, and as a people, that's where we're coming from. And so I'm gonna continue. I just want to ask you, is I just want to check how much time I've got so I can
Should we work with 20 minutes? And
20 minutes.
yeah, so I'll talk for shorter, but yeah,
Right,
20 minutes.
I will fly through them.
Okay.
So what I'm gonna So what I want to first, I want to do is to just acknowledge the natural world and the plant kingdom. And why I want to acknowledge the plant kingdom is to understand that herbal medicine is a sector of what we use from the plant kingdom. So we are a part of nature, and the plant kingdom is a part of that nature. And for us, it's a key part of nature. So we may not think about this, but I just want to look at the aspects, the fact that we use plants for oxygen, food, our homes, our clothes, fuel, perfume, ornamentals, beauty products, money, paper, ink, all of this comes from the plant kingdom. Without the plant kingdom, we cannot survive. We like to think that here in Europe we're in the first world, but the reality is that the natural world is the first world, and then we build our world on top of the first world, of which we in the human body is a part of. The physical body is made up from that world. So we say in herbal medicine and holistic health, because I'm a holistic health, I practice holistic health, so not just plants, but holistic health. So let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food. So the first intake of the plant kingdom is our nutrition. So that's the basis. So even when we use herbal medicine, there is that basis from the plant kingdom. Okay, so now I've done it. Let's go into the herbal medicine side of things. So what is herbal medicine? So it's basically using, whether it be the leaves, the seeds, the flowers, the stem, the bark, the root, all of these aspects of the plant are used to heal. Now, in modern times, they use it for perfume and like we mentioned before, but specifically for herbal medicine, that's what we're talking about. And humanity has been using herbal medicine since time immemorial. And if we think about it naturally, there would be no other form of medicine that we can use. We come from the natural world. The body, when you break it down, organs, tissues, cells, when you break it down, the body is made of the elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, magnesium, potassium, and they come together. These intelligences come together, and they make an amino acid or, proteins or carbohydrates. But these are all elements that are found in the earth. And because we are of the physical earth also, we must feed from that which we came from, which is the earth. And so the plants give us our food, and as an extension, we then can, once we know the usage, we can then use the plants to heal. And so humans have been doing that since time immemorial. And, we learned a lot from the animals as well. The animals would take certain plants and we'd see them using them, and then we would use them. So this was taken from an extract. And as we said, herbal medicine is used from time immemorial. There are documentations, it's written on stone, in walls, how human beings have been using plants. And we know that contemporary science, especially the pharmaceutical world, is built on the plant kingdom. I don't know if any of you have been to the gardens I'll remember the name of the garden, but there was the first herbal medicine garden. In fact, that's where, you know, doctors first got their understanding of using herbs. And then it branched off into medicine. And I'm talking about the Chelsea Physics Garden. That's it. So I don't know if you've ever been there. It's a wonderful place, lots of information there. So herbal medicine has been used by humankind throughout all major civilizations. This first one is Imhotep in Africa, Egypt, Africa. The next one is Hippocrates, which is known as the father of medicine in Western medicine. In fact, doctors still take the Hippocratic Oath. We know that the early Greeks went and studied and learned from Africans in Kemet, and one of the things that they learned was medicine. We know about Ayurveda, again, traditional in India. Traditionally, they've used herbal medicine. The Chinese, you know, because they're economically savvy, they've brought that part of their traditions with them, and we see them all over our high streets. In the Chinese TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. Here we have a West African healer. Here we have a South African woman in traditional Sangoma. Here in what we would call the Americas, you had the native Indians who would use herbal medicine. In fact, the knowledge now that is known in most of America, when they look at their herbs, they call it herbal medicine, came from the native Indians. And of course, here in Europe, there's a whole knowledge about herbal medicine. They had the Druids and different people who they called pagans, and then the Roman Catholic Church, you know, some of these people who practiced natural medicine using the nature, many of them were wiped out, women, during the time when the Roman Catholic Church was, you know, getting rid of people who were practicing natural medicine and establishing Christianity in Europe. Also, you have Avicenna. So again, amongst the Arabs, he was a great natural healer. So all over the world, every single culture, and if you just think about it naturally, you would have had to have used herbal medicine. So when we came to the earth, and whether you see that through evolution or by divine hand, the nature is what was there. Now, I've put this little one guy here at the end, which is aspirin. And the reason why I put that there is because aspirin was the first mass-produced drug. And it was done in Germany by the company Bayer, which still exists today. And it was first extracted from the salicylic, so it uses salicylates, salicylic acids, and the white willow tree. So let's just move on. Is where even ancient Egypt, they were using this tree. So this is where aspirin first came about. There was someone using it for rheumatism, but traditional herbalists were using this. And so a drug was developed, and you got the first mass-produced drug, and we know the rest of the story, you know, until today, you know, it's one of the major economic, it has a big economy behind the industry. I think it certainly accounts for at least nearly 20% of GDP, certainly for the States. So it's a huge industry, has derived from pharmaceuticals, which obviously had to have derived from herbs. Let's just move forward. So this is Hippocrates. And again, a lot of people don't realize that in Europe, there was a whole science that called the humoral medicine, which only finished about 100, 150 years ago. For 2,000 years, there was a system called the humoral theory that was here in Europe. And again, this notion of healing actually came from the Greeks, who were the fathers of European civilization, who studied in Africa. But that idea, so you're talking about basic elements, that idea was also there. Oh, just to say, so the caduceus, you will see in medicine, this sign, this also came out of ancient Egypt. So even the sign of medicine and healing came out of ancient Egypt. But you will see this idea of using plants among Ayurveda, and it's a whole science. So Ayurveda actually means the science of life. And in traditional Indian medicine, they incorporate their many deities, their many gods, and it is accepted worldwide, loved. Europeans, Africans, Asians, everybody will go to an ashram and feel very comfortable as they talk about their different gods and their different herbs that they use. It's a respected tradition, spiritual tradition, which incorporates herbal medicine. And so many of the formulas that they have are many thousands of years old that have passed down. But you have that same tradition with traditional Chinese medicine. They have had their medicines for thousands of years. It's been a part of their culture. And African medicine, there's almost this. Oh, okay, that's that voodoo stuff. Now, African medicine is the mother of the medicine. We see where the Greeks came and they studied in our temples and they brought that knowledge for thousands of years. And as a result of that, you got the pharmaceutical industry coming out. Yet, and there's a whole reasoning behind it. Yet, if we begin to speak about African medicine and African spirituality, there is a negative connotation. Now, I am not saying that there have not been negative things done by people who practice African spirituality, but you will find that amongst people who practice traditional Asian tradition, the Ayurvedic. You'll find that in TCM. You find that in modern day medicine now, where doctors will take people's lives, because that's about the individual human being. So there is a spiritual aspect where there is a communication with the gods. So in Ayurveda, they talk about their deities. In traditional African medicine, they also speak about deities, and used herbal medicine as a part of those practices. This is where I was with a traditional healer in Togo, actually in a dry riverbed. They were collecting some medicines to take back to dry in the sun and then pound, in those big mortar and pestles where 2 or 3 people can pound them. And it was very interesting because you had European women coming over, buying up these herbs and taking them to America to sell. It was very interesting. So this is also a woman I went and stayed with in the hills in Jamaica. So of course the traditions also, as Africans were taken to the Caribbean, we still used traditional herbal medicine. We had Nanny of the Maroons, who was known to use herbs and other things to help to free herself from the British. In Haiti. So this was up in the hills in the mountains where we sat and was, getting some information. And again, this is really interesting because some of the top universities where they are doing their PhDs, they come and do their thesis. They sit with her to get information for their thesis to go up back to the US. And we found that also in Kew Gardens, the professors, because it's professors actually, it's not your just degrees, professors, they go to all the tropical regions, sit with the traditional people, what they call the native people. They then get their PhD from what they learn from the traditional healers. Interesting. So, and just to say as well, and this is what they told us why they were there, all their research and that they do, they have the Kew Gardens have an agreement with pharmaceutical companies. If they want to research a new herb, they know exactly where to come and they get all the information from there. So again, that's interesting that they've taken it from traditional knowledge, and then that same information will come through the university. So myself went to university, some of the information that they've garnered would come through the university. So again, it's filtered into the system in the way that, you know, is designed. They design it. So let's just in the next few minutes look at ways of approaching herbal medicine. I think someone's got them there. Could you mute, please? There's a lot of background noise for the person who.
Can I just ask everyone to check and make sure they're on mute, please?
Okay. So there are different ways to approach herbal medicine. It can be traditionally passed down. You can have a love of herbs and you've just got an interest and you do your own research on the internet, you get your books, you can study at a diploma level, and you can do university level, and you can be a practitioner where you're actually using the herbs. And then you can take herbs in many ways. You know, you can take them as pessaries, you can take them as teas. So you and you know, I'm talking very generally because it's 20 minutes, but just to understand that, you know, there is a science behind the herbs. So, you know, it might look very simple. You're putting a herb in a cup and then you drink it. But what you're doing is you're diffusing the phytochemicals that are in that plant into the water so that you can then take those plant chemicals into your body. It might be to fight against pathogens, because in the natural world, the plant grows alongside bacteria, viruses, parasites. And so it develops, and we call them secondary metabolites. It develops chemical compounds in order to fight off these potential pathogens to the plant, because the plant can't get up and run. So what the plant does, and just so you understand, the plants are intelligences. They are intelligences. And what the plant does, it then creates phytochemicals to fight off these, whether bacteria, virus, etc. And these are the same secondary metabolites that and there are primary. Primary means the first. So primary metabolites in plants, you know, would be things like your carbohydrates, because remember I started at the beginning saying the foundation is in the nutrition. So carbohydrates, your proteins, lipids, like your primary, those are the things that the plant needs for itself to grow, and we as humans take them for ourselves because we can't feed ourselves. We're not autotrophs. The plant can use the sun's light to make food. We can't do that. So the reality is we are actually parasites because we feed off of the plants. We can't feed ourselves. And so the primary metabolites are like your carbohydrates, which you use to grow and grow muscles and all of that, you know, and your proteins and your lipids and that kind of thing. Your secondary metabolites is where we start to go into medicine, the medicinal uses as an anti-inflammatory, for example, which is what aspirin is. It's anti-inflammatory. It cools down the cell. It helps to repair tissues. And so, and then these are the chemicals that the pharmaceutical companies now will isolate that and then make a drug, because they can't patent a plant. So they have to actually extract the active ingredient and then patent that, and then they can make money from that. And I'm just going to finish off here. So there are different approaches that you can take, just like if you decide that you want to, you know, just love plants and just want to do a little bit of research, or if you should pass it down traditionally. Well, you will find that for many thousands of years, actually, here in Europe, there's a thing called the doctrine of signatures. And they would say that how a plant looks will give you an idea of what that plant can do to heal. But I also want to say at this point that those who work deeply, the spiritual ones who work deeply with plants, have a level of communication with the plants. And that lady that you saw there, Evelyn Harris, for example, she will be, so she was saying that, you know, she will be up in her garden with her plants, what she grows. And then she will just see the face of someone in that plant. And within a day or two, that person will make their way up to there. And she may not have seen them for years. So there is another level, and I'm just going to kind of touch that because there are other aspects. But I'm going to keep more to the now. I was going to say, but what we kind of understand of herbal medicine in kind of this box. But there are the aspects to plants, and I will say this. Whilst I was at uni, a professor came over from the US, and she studied the history of plants, but she was looking at the phytochemicals in the plants, phytochemicals, and she was doing a lecture, and at one of the talks she spoke specifically about the plant from which we get cocaine from, yeah, the coca plant. And what they found in the evolution of that plant was that in its early stages of evolution, that plant did not have that chemical that we now know that we use, they use in the medicines and people use for drugs. And what they suspect was that during the plant's life cycle, there were insects, a particular insect that would eat that plant down, which threatened the plant's survival, and it can't get up and run. It has to survive. And what they surmised happened was that the plant, when the insect is eating the plant, some of that saliva remains on that plant. And what the plant did was analyze the saliva of that insect and then made a neurotoxin which would affect that insect's nervous system. So whenever that insect ate the plant again, it would feel woozy and fall to the ground. Eat the plant, feel woozy and fall to the ground. And after a while, insects are living intelligences. They pass that down to the next generation, leave that plant alone, and hence was able to survive. Now, the question that I asked was, how can a plant analyze the central nervous system of an insect and it doesn't have a brain? So I'm going to leave that question out there. Okay, so I'm just going to finish now. So a systematic approach. So you have different approaches that you can use in herbal medicine, and so I'm just going to say a systematic approach is that the body has 11 systems, and you can approach herbal medicine by looking at the different systems in the person, then having knowledge of certain plants. You use plants to assist in certain systems. So for example, nervines, if someone has a neurological issue, or if they have anxiety or something pertaining to the nerves, these are two very light ones. Valerian and oats. The respiratory system, thymus, these are things that you can, which is thyme. Inula, which is another herb that you can use. And then say, for example, the skin. I've just picked 3 random systems of the body: calendula and burdock. And then I'm just going to show a few plants, some of those. And then, so this is, the first one here is Valerian. And I just want to say, I was doing a course and there was a nurse on the course, and yes, I have nurses and doctors as patients who come to me, so just to say. And when we were talking in depth about this plant, when I was doing the week specifically looking at nervine, she said, I know that plant. In Ghana, they give it to people who, she was saying, like, if you like act out, like, if you go in, like, having an episode, mental episode, just getting a bit, she said they will give it, or if you're highly anxious. And she said she always wanted to know what that plant was. And when we did the course, when she looked at it, she recognized it and realized it's a plant that they use back home. Now, this same plant, Valerian, is mentioned in the Bible as spikenard. When the woman cleans Jesus' feet with her hair, she uses spikenard. This is the plant. This is the family of plant. So just to understand that these are coming from thousands of years. The man in the middle is Avena sativa, oats. We eat oats. Well, you can use the oat seed for medicine. And vervain, again, it's another one that we use in the nervous system. So I'm just going to finish off there. Thyme, licorice, I will say, like, so as Funke was saying at the beginning, you do need to understand herbs. So for example, licorice is a great herb, can be used for so many things, absolutely wonderful herb, but it can raise the blood pressure. So if you have high blood pressure, you would either stay away or do it in consultation with a herbalist if you're going to take licorice, because it could potentially raise your blood pressure. It could depend on dosage, but so there are certain herbs you do need to be aware of and what the side effects. And then there's another thing like drug herb interaction. So I'm going to finish. This is calendula, this is burdock, two herbs again that can be used for the skin. Burdock works on the liver, but the liver is your major detoxification organ in the body, and so we use plants like the burdock to help the liver to carry out its function to detox, and by doing that you're helping to rid toxins out of the body, which again can help the skin. And we use these herbs, for example, in things like eczema, psoriasis, dermatitis. These kinds of plants can be used. So I'm gonna stop there and ask if there's any question. I hope I was on time there, from Kay.
Sorry. Yeah, no, you're good, Kandeke. I think what I would say is, if there's any questions, would you be kind enough to just be patient at the end? Because I think
Sure.
No, not you. I'm just talking generally to the audience, because sometimes someone asks a question and then you want to follow on. So I think it was a little bit better if we just say, you know, I'll speak a little bit in case I answer your question, and then we'll just leave it open for people to ask questions. Okay, thank you very much for that insight presentation, Kandeke.
You're welcome.
Well done. So just to follow on some of what Kandeke was saying, I think she really gave us a really good intro, and I think I'll just follow on from where she stopped. And just for the benefit of those that don't know me, because I know I didn't put much information about myself because I spoke more about Kandeke on the flyer. So for the benefit of those that don't know me, I'm a pharmacist. I probably will start to call myself an integrative pharmacist now. I own my own pharmacy, and I say that we bridge the gap between the use of medicines, herbs, supplements, and well-being. So in that, I'm not like a full-time herbalist like Kandeke, but I am a herbalist in the sense that I blend it with modern practice, and I try to support people in using a mixture of medicines and herbs and tell them how to use herbs with medications, you know, or if they have a disease or what have you. So that's a little bit, and I'll put my details in the chat later on, but the pharmacy I run is called Westside Integrative Pharmacy, and I also work part-time in general practice for the NHS. It was because of some of the limitations I felt I've seen over the years in sort of conventional practice that led me to really go in a bit more depth when it comes to herbal practice and to incorporate it in my pharmacy practice, because it's something I feel a lot of patients want to do, and sometimes in modern practice we're just like, no, sorry, there's no evidence, you can't. So I kind of decided that we needed to do more to support patients so they can get the best of both worlds. So that's kind of a little bit about my background. So I think just building a little bit on what Kandeke was saying about the origins of herbal medicines and the traditions, I think just to be aware, like when we talk about herbal medicines, there's different types of herbal medicine. And like Kandeke was saying, the Indian herbal medicine is very established. So is the Chinese one. And they actually incorporate it more into their modern day practice. So if you go to China, you'll often find that when they're treating people with cancer, they'll also use herbal medicine as well. Same with even the COVID-19. If you start looking at, I don't expect you guys to know this, but because I have to look at the data sometimes, there's a lot of case reports of where they use herbal medicines alongside like modern medicine, where there were some patients that maybe weren't responding the way they anticipated. So these are, and they've got like reference sources, like India has like a Pharmaceuticals, which is one of, is like kind of like a major reference we use in the pharmacy world. So they're really established, really respected, you know, native Indians as well. But again, when it comes to African traditional medicine, I feel as if there's a little bit of nose turning not even by other people, but even by us kind of thing, and I think that is partly to do because of the spiritual aspect of it. And I think we need to be careful. There's a lot of different schools of thought. There's one school of thought that actually African medicine, it's the evolution of herbal medicine, traditional medicine was kind of interrupted by slavery and colonialism. And that was when the inferiority complex came in, and anything African was bad. And that includes traditional medicine. But the reason why I feel it's important that we don't neglect it is because, yes, there isn't what we call scientific evidence in a sense, but that's because the principles of both genres of medicine are a little bit different. But we cannot ignore the wealth of history, the anecdotal data that supports the use of this. This has evolved over time. Many families have certain herbal remedies they use. So, but on the other side, and I will say both sides of the coin, on the other side, the issue we have is that things are very different. So when my mother was growing up, and she said their grandma would just go to the forest if they had an ailment sometimes and just pick certain plants and use. The difficulty is we are living in a different time. So, and this is when it comes to the safety issue, because the quality of the plants and the herbs aren't what they used to be. So it would be very dangerous for me to just go out there and say, oh, I know that plant, I'm going to pick it and use, because the quality is not quite how it used to be. Even in Africa, where I think the quality is probably a bit better than here in some respects, but they still have that challenge. There's stories of people going to the market in certain places and taking certain herbs and analyzing it and finding different things there. So one of the things when it comes to safety that I think we need to be very careful is, where do we get these herbs from? Even in today's world, like, where do you get the herbs from? Are you getting it from, like sometimes you see people just selling it in the market. You have no idea of the checks they've run, etc. And this is why I think with anything you're doing, it's really good to go to a trusted person if you're not sure, someone that knows a little bit more about that area, rather than just relying on your own knowledge. Because of this issue, there's stories today of some people, because anytime there's money, and herbs is becoming big money, and because it's less regulated, it's a lot easier for people to do compared to pharmaceuticals. There's stories of people taking things like ginseng, adulterating it, but the color is still the same, and when you check it, it's actually not what's on the label that's in there. So, and then this is where sometimes people say, oh, I took a herb, it didn't work. And it's not because the herb's not, doesn't do that, but it's because sometimes you got it from the wrong source. It hasn't done what it's supposed to do. So the safety aspect, one of the things, like for me, I'm very selective in terms of where I get the herbs that I sell from and how I use it. So the other thing is how it's used, that can also play a big role. Yes, drug interaction is an important one to think about. So if you're on medication, it's always important to check and ask someone trustworthy, like whether or not this works. And sometimes it's really important not to just go online and check it, because sometimes you check things on the internet and it gives you a partial answer. And sometimes even when I look at the data, I have to really check with eagle's eye, because, like, for example, sometimes something like nettle leaf, which one of the herbs that I really, really love, it will say that, oh, this can cause abortion, not realizing that it's a different part of the nettle plant that can do that, not necessarily nettle leaf. So that's important. That's another important to check. Now, the other thing is, why are you using it? In terms of also spending your money, just being a bit careful. Why are you using it? A lot of time, like the other day, someone came to me and said, oh, I really want some herb or some bitter melon. Can you help me out? And it was like, why do you want it? It's like, oh, I just saw them talking about it somewhere. And I was just like, I really need to have it. And that is the power of marketing. Marketing is so powerful that we don't even realize it sometimes, but I had to now look for the patient and the person that wanted it to actually check. And when I looked into it, it was like there's no information on using it. There were so many different forms out there, and it was like, okay, what form is best? What is going to do something positive for this patient? I mean, it's vitamin, and for those of you that don't know, is quite good for diabetes. It can help with blood sugar. It can help with the liver, and also weight loss, so to speak. So it was like, well, what do I, so in looking into it, there's a lot of formulations out there that actually don't really do anything, So, I in the end, I selected the main herb because when in doubt, I think sometimes it's best to just use the main herb because you get what it says on the pack, so to speak. So, why are you using it? How are you checking the effects? And I say back to, it's really important to work with someone trustworthy in order to get the best out of it and not just take it to tick a box. So some of the other problems that we have with herbs is the lack of standardization and QC. Sometimes the quality of herbs that you get from different places may be different. And because they're not checked or analyzed in the lab, is one of sometimes the challenges we have. And I think the reason I say this is not because I don't think herbs have a place. Clearly, the nature of my practice is bridging the gap. So I definitely think that it has a place. But I think we need to be careful about how we use it and where we use it. I think Kandake mentioned in her presentation about herbs being a form of food, and good food is medicine. And I think that's important because I think personally, based on my experience and my opinion, I think in terms of using herbs safely, you can use it as food. So like I say to people, you're probably better off taking a herbal tea that might do you some good, even if we don't have the so-called scientific evidence, then you are taking a cup of cappuccino, for example, for those people that like cappuccino. So I think if you incorporate more herbs in your food and less junk, that's definitely a good thing. The second thing is sometimes I think it can be useful when you've got what we call an acute or short-term condition. For instance, I have a male patient. For those of you that don't know, sometimes men, as they're getting older, their prostate gland can become a bit enlarged. So it affects their ability to urinate because of the swellings and other things. And I have an older guy that was a little bit reluctant to go straight on the medication. And so I said to him, okay, why don't you try this herb, saw palmetto it's called, which is really good for men and that thing. So as soon as he starts getting any of those symptoms, and that can sometimes be a long-term problem, but over time, as soon as he starts getting some of those symptoms, just take a little bit of this and he finds that the symptoms go away, but he always comes back. So we kind of like work together kind of thing. So, and he's been able to ward off using medications for that because he's able to use it as soon as he starts getting the symptoms. And we had that discussion. So he's on a few other medications. So we've been able to make sure it's fine with his medicine. And this is where I think herbs can be really good because that has stopped him from having to go on to another long-term medication because he started using it right early on at the onset. And because he's under us, so we still check his blood, we still check other things. So in terms of the safety and everything, all that is covered. So that's kind of like a basic example of where it can fit in. It's a little bit more complicated and difficult when you have like a long-term condition. Kandake gave an example of licorice, for example, which is a really good herb. And, the effect it can sometimes have on blood pressure, so something like that, you probably want to be really careful if the patient had blood pressure problems already, or if they had other conditions, or if they were on other medications, because when it comes to medicines, it's not just the direct interactions you're thinking about, we're also thinking about the effects and what impact the herb has on your body, what impact the medication has, and trying to merge those together. And sometimes it is, I think, a little bit more of an art form than it is a science form at times. That takes a little bit of experience and detective work to find the right choice kind of thing. So that's kind of where I think herbal medicine can be used safely in today's world. Now, one of the reasons a lot of times people say that herbs is natural and it's safe, in my opinion, that's a little bit of a myth, because there are some really strong herbs out there that, even I was speaking to Kandika the other day, and she was just like, yes, just don't touch those ones. You're better off not touching some of those. Partly because, apart from the fact that some of them are really dangerous if used inappropriately, and like there are other alternative, easier things that you might be able to use for such a problem. And this is where, when people say no side effect safety, we have to be careful, because one of the things that's little bit difficult with herbal medicine is we don't have, because of the nature of herbal medicine, and it's very individualistic, and like conventionally, a lot of times we work on a population basis. So sometimes like it's difficult to tell if people are having side effects, because we don't report it the same way we report conventional medicine. So that can be a bit of a challenge. And again, it goes back to making sure you're working with someone who's well qualified and well informed. Now, people say there's no side effects compared to conventional medicine, and that's a bit of a myth. And I'll tell you why. One thing to remember is that conventional medicine, we have the data. So yes, if you come and say, oh yes, it caused these side effects, 9 out of 10 times we can do something about it. Now, I'm not saying there aren't challenges, and some people have challenges. I mean, but we know that, and people say it doesn't work, they took this medicine, etc. And sometimes we know that 50% of people do not use medicines as they're supposed to. So that means that a lot of people don't get the effects they're supposed to, and that's not their fault. That's also partly our fault in practice, because sometimes people aren't getting the right information they need to use things properly. So that's something that is on us, but as a patient, you can be a bit more proactive in getting the information, because at the end of the day, it's going to affect you. It's going to affect you and not other people, so to speak. And then the other thing about side effects is that there have been a lot of case reports about some herbs, and people that have been healthy before and maybe decide to take a particular herb. Kava's one example. Years ago, it was taken off in the UK because a lot of people got liver failure from it. Some people that were previously healthy ended up needing to have liver transplants. So, that's a good example. There was a popular herb called a cleanse bitter in Africa, in Nigeria, I think. And a young man had liver failure from taking it after self-medicating. And when they analyzed it, they realized it contained herbs in there that can affect the liver quite significantly. So it's really important. Again, it goes back to using the right thing at the right time, the right way. But the idea that it's natural and can't cause any harm is a myth. If something is doing something, can do something good in your body, then it can also do something not so good if you don't use it properly or the right way. So I think those are some of the things I just want you to think about from a safety point of view. And then I think for me, I think herbal medicine can definitely play a role when it comes to maintaining our well-being and health, and also just, getting us to have that mindset of good health, because I think that's what I feel it does when I'm working with patients. If they're thinking about herbs, then it means that they're thinking about their health, and that makes it a little bit easier for me to support them. I also think it can, if used properly and appropriately, it may be able to reduce the need for many medications. We have a lot of people today that are using more medication than they need to, because sometimes the system is a little bit inundated, so we can't check up on patients as much as we should. So sometimes they get left on certain medications for longer than they need to, etc. And so I think herbs can somehow bridge the gap and help to minimize the need for some other medications in some cases. And I think just in terms of managing certain symptoms. So like I mentioned, the issue with the man that I was dealing with, there's a lot of cases like that where I feel sometimes herb can bridge the gap and maybe stop someone from using a medicine that is really potent. And, you know, there may be a more simple herb they can use that can help keep things at bay. Similar, like someone that has regular water infections, there's some, you know, good herbs and good natural alternatives that might prevent them from needing those water, from having those water infections, and thereby reducing their need to have continuous antibiotics, which kind of leads to antibiotic resistance, which is another problem. So herbs definitely have their role, but I think we need to make sure we're using them safely, appropriately, and we're getting the right information to support us in using the herbs. So I think I will stop there and just let people go ahead and ask any questions. I think, was it Makiba maybe was the first person that had a question. So just if you have a question or if you want to say anything about what we've spoken about, then just feel free to say, unmute yourself and just have your piece. Thank you all.
Hi, good evening. I'm sorry, I was a bit late in joining the talk because I only saw it literally half an hour ago. But I was interested. I think somebody mentioned nettles. Is it the same as stinging nettles? Because I was interested.
Yeah.
I was reminded recently that it's good for cleansing the blood and something like that. And funny enough, I just was chopping away some in my garden, and I was wondering, and then I Googled it, and I saw a YouTube video talking about, you know, you have to dry it for 3 days. But anyway, I just picked up some of the green leaves and I boiled it. I had no idea how much I should boil and all of that. So any idea how much I should boil and drink? I just picked up a bundle of it, washed it in salt water and then boiled it. What is it really good for?
I think for me, I'm always a little bit hesitant to without having a proper conversation with someone in terms of advising them when it comes to specific herbs, just because herbal is so, you know, like nettle, for example, you can just use it as like an ordinary tea, take a spoon, you know, have it with tea, and that's fine. It can be used as a general tonic. It's good for women health, but sometimes if you've got a specific problem and if you want to take it for a specific reason, then sometimes it's a bit difficult. I feel personally, I find it a little bit difficult to tell people like, oh, use it this way, because I don't really know what they want to use it for. So that kind of makes me hesitant to say to you, oh, use it. It's a nutritious herb, you know, so it contains a lot of nutrients. So if you wanted to take, you know, if you're not on any medications or anything and you wanted to take like a spoon, you know, twice a day as a tea or something, a teaspoon, then that would probably be fine. It wouldn't do you any harm, kind of thing. But anything else, I kind of would rather someone came to me direct. I don't know if Kandeke, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, thank you. So I have a slightly different perspective because obviously you're going from that perspective. So I work with the earth and the natural seasons. And so at this time, so I've just finished doing the course and I've got another one coming up. So I'll let you know about that, those who are going to be interested. And I'm encouraging the people who are there too. Nettle is one of them. There's another one called Galium Aspirin. I don't know if you use that one, Fonke, but the earth is bringing these plants to you now. And these are what we call the spring herbs. Soon, when Galium starts to flower, we don't use it. When you start see the seed, you stop using it because the chemicals in the nettle change. So we only use them when they're before they go to seed. So I just want to make you be aware of that. But we use those to cleanse, lymphatic cleansing. I've used nettle for women who have heavy bleeding, for example, but that's a separate thing. Yeah. So it can be used in teas. Europeans here will know how to use nettle. They make nettle soup. They use it as a food, you know. So for me, I don't, I'm not constrained in terms of how the conventional system would have one view herbs. I don't view it from that perspective. I view it from a much more natural perspective with knowledge of how to use them. So yeah, so that for me there's two paradigms. There's the traditional paradigms, and they were as trustworthy and as effective and knew what they're doing as your doctor now. In fact, your doctor actually doesn't know about the herbs. It's the pharmaceutical companies. All he'll do is write out a prescription. He doesn't know anything about that side. He'll just write a prescription because that's what he was informed to do during med school. It's the scientists who make it. Whereas the traditional healer knew the plant, knew how to use the plant. And that is why you have those people who are studying not degree level, but PhD level, going to them and learning. So there, I think basically there are some herbs around us that you can use quite safely, and the earth is giving them to you. And I've been telling my students to go and drink and cleanse that now. In Europe here, in the UK, they have a saying, the herb Galium Aspirin. And maybe when you're talking next, Funke, I'll just go and grab, because I have a big bag. I went and got a and I'm drinking that now. And with them, they say, for this herb Galium Aspirin, they say, so this is for you sisters, if you drink these herbs for 30 days, then any man that beholds you will fall madly in love with you. Right? So, and then you have these lovely tales that go with them, right? So but basically what it's doing, it's cleansing you, and we use that for eczema as a lymphatic cleanser and so forth. So I have a slightly different perspective from Funke, but I understand exactly what she's saying. I understand what she's saying. Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah,
it's really ironic. Sorry, it's really ironic because literally 2 days ago, I'm sure it was your voice, I saw a clip of somebody. Let me see if I can. Is that you?
Good morning on this beautiful.
Yes, who sent that? I sent that to my private group, so they're obviously. That's the herb I was out picking.
I am so glad, because I've been trying to find out whose voice is that, because you mentioned about a course and you mentioned about the nettles, and I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased.
Oh, wow, I did not know it left my private group.
I'm so glad. I forwarded that link to so many people, and the funny thing is,
oh my gosh,
the funny thing is, literally the day before, I chopped away so many of the singing nettles, and the other plant you mentioned, I need to know the name of it, because everybody's asking me what's the name of that plant.
It's Galium Aspirin.
Tell me how to spell it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Put it in the chat. Put it in chat.
I think it's fair to say, like, with some herbs, nettle being one of them, the margin of safety is quite high because it's a nutritious herb and it's very nutritious. So you can get away with taking a bit more than less kind of thing. But if you've got a particular condition that you want to use it for, I still think it's good to speak one-on-one with someone like Kandake or myself or whoever, and just to make sure you are using it properly. But if you just want to take it as food, then that's a different matter kind of thing. I think, like I said, some people are a bit shy. So I think one of the questions that... Sorry.
Could I just ask one more question? Could you put the spelling of the other one in the chat? But also, what would you recommend for somebody who's got keloids? Is there anything that would be good?
I asked, just because of the nature of this session, like, I mean, Kandake will put her details. So if there's specific questions about conditions, it's best to speak one-on-one, because that's the thing about herbal medicine, and that's what people sometimes say, oh, can I use this herb for this? And Kandake, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but herbal medicine is not, when you, sometimes like the herb that might be right for keloids for you might not necessarily be right for the next person. So it is, that's the difference between conventional. If you came to me and said, oh, I need a painkiller for this, I might just say, oh, go ahead, take some aspirin and ibuprofen. And that's what we'll tell everybody, because that's how conventional medicine works. But herbal medicine is a little bit different. And that's why it's a bit difficult to use mainstream, because it's a little bit more specific to the individual. So what might be right for you might not be right for the, and this used to irritate me when I first came into herbal medicine, because I would ask questions like you're doing to some of the more experienced herbalist, and they wouldn't want to give me an answer, and I'd be like, just tell me. I mean, why can't you tell me? But it is a bit different kind of thing. So we will share our details so that you can reach out to myself or Candace to, if it's for specific conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, is that okay, Candace?
Yes, of course, sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I think someone was asking Candace in terms of, you touched on it a little bit, but you didn't go into so much detail when you were speaking. So in today's world, knowing that like traditional medicine and use of herbs was very much, you know, a part of spirituality, so to speak, and used together even today in like Africa a lot. If you go to native herbalists, that's why people kind of look down on it, because they feel like they invoke the gods, so to speak, in what they're doing. In today's world, do you think there's a way for people to, you know, apply the concepts of traditional medicine, even if they're not necessarily, they don't necessarily worship the gods how maybe our forefathers did? Because I still feel a bit like even the Ayurveda, you know, all those forms of traditional medicine, they still apply some of those things. So from an African perspective, do you think there's a way we can ingrain that?
Most definitely. As you know, I also studied with the Dogon people of Burkina Faso for the last 7 years. So the traditional healer you saw me there with, he's from Togo. I was in Togo at the time, studying with him. And you know, I think as a people, we just need, just as human beings, first of all, it's to, I call it humility, and in the temples they call it humility, to really just step back and first of all have that humility to understand that we human beings are merely a speck in this wonder of a universe. Now, as human beings, when we, for example, put something in our mouth as food, we consciously have nothing to do with what happens to that food when it goes into our body. The intelligences in our body take over. We have nothing to do with the plant taking the energy of the sun and making all of these phytochemicals. All we simply do is take it. The point I'm making is these intelligences exist around us. We don't say to our heart, okay, heart, keep beating, and then in the morning I'll take over when I wake up. All right, we have nothing to do with these intelligences that every human being came into this world, and there were principles already in place when we got here, the greatest person to the smallest. So we are simply fitting into a greater intelligence, whether we like to think we are or not. So in terms of incorporating, the reality is we don't even have to say incorporate, but because of the mindset that's been now put on us, and so the European worldview, and that's what it is, the world view from a European perspective is now perceived as the favorable way to look at life. And so our ancestors and the traditions that they came with, as you said, were looked down on. And the truth is, our mothers and fathers are the bedrock of civilization. They are the ones who gave. So the Greeks, who modern medicine have no problem seeing as their forefathers, as the one who were responsible for giving the knowledge, the Greeks had no problem speaking of the people who taught them, and they held them in high regard. They held them in high, and they held their gods and the way that they saw things in high regard. It's only when we got to modern times, and there's a whole history, of course, we know why things descended. So, as I said to you, Funke, the natural world is the first world. And then these so-called civilized world, which are called the first world now, are actually on top of the first world. And so we are already subservient, although we like to think we're not. We think we're so intelligent, and we think, you know, all of this. We are already subservient to nature. We are subservient to nature. We have to eat to survive here. We must breathe. For us to live on this planet, From the time we're born to we die, there are a set of rules that we have been given by nature. We're under nature. We have to eat if you want to stay here. You have to breathe if you want to stay here. We had nothing to do that. That was here in place before we got here. So in African traditional spirituality, what we are doing is honoring that. We honor and we recognize that the sun is giving life. Without that, life stops. Without the plants, without the trees, we're out of here. We check out of here. So from that perspective, from that world view, we honor that. Now, when you have a modern European perspective, it is about how can these plants, how can this benefit us, even at the cost of destroying the planet. It's a total different paradigm. And you can see where even they have seen that they're getting themselves into trouble. So is there a place for our Africa? Of course. If we want to survive as a human being, as species, we have to return to that kind of thinking. That's my perspective.
So I think what I understand you're saying, just to clarify, is really it's about the basics, is about respecting nature, respecting the plants. I think getting to know the plants, like I know, like I think my mother was saying the other day how, you know, they'd spoken to a herbalist and they'd given them something for, I think someone, you know, her partner or something had some, you know, some issues with his stomach, and they'd given them a plant and say, use this. And so the next day they saw that same plant and they were like, oh, okay, that's the plant the guy recommended. Let's just go and take it and use it. And it didn't have any effect. So they went back like, how come? And he said, yeah, do you know the plant? Do you talk to the plant? You know, and I think, so it goes back to really respecting nature, you know, respecting the plants. And you can do that regardless of who you worship, you know, even because it's the principles, right? If we serve God, God made man and he made plants, and it's respecting it. And I think maybe over time, like human beings have just seen it, you know, as a money-making industry. And I think even like you said, that's why you go to different practitioners and people say, oh, but I spoke to my doctor, or I spoke to my pharmacist, and they didn't say this, they didn't ask me this, and I didn't get this result. We all study the same thing, you know, we all have the same baseline, you know, in terms of, you know, the piece of paper we get, but how we practice, how we apply ourselves is the difference. And I think it's just really, so whoever asked that question, it really is about respecting nature. And for me as well, if you believe in a higher power, if you believe in God, I believe praying over what you're doing, because that's what the older herbalists used to do. So I don't think there's anything wrong with praying and blessing, you know, the herbs or the medications that you're using and taking and hoping for an effect. I think that's kind of how it can be blended in today's world. That's fair to add that?
Please, of course. I mean, you know, yeah, it's good to hear the other perspective, you know. So yeah.
Can I ask, Kandake, what, in your experience, is there any major difference, like from in terms of like Rastafarian and like, you know, your experience in terms of the West Indian and then the African concept? Is there like any major differences in terms of the practices, etc.?
Oh yeah, there is, because Rastafari comes off of the Judo-Christian, because remember Haile Selassie is seen as God, the King of Kings, you know, so it comes off a Judo-Christian, because, you know, that Christian side of thing. Whereas when you go to traditional African spirituality, it's not a Judo-Christian. In fact, it predates Judo-Christian. Yeah. So then it's looking at, you know, the neter or the nature, you know, and you know, you're looking at these principles or these deities or these gods that, or these intelligences, because that's how the Ayurvedic calls them, the intelligences that rule over different parts of creation, so and of life. So, you know, Yoruba have Ogun and Oshun, and, you know, all of these different principles or deities that govern different aspects of life, whereas Rastafari comes under the Judo Christian. But where the link came is because Rastafari was about the earth, using nature, using the herbs, using the food. And so that connection with nature, which is innately African, that's what we came with, and we didn't let that go. So the Christianity that was imposed on us during slavery, that was one aspect, but that spiritual side that still remembered the old ways used that pathway, and that's the pathway that took me back to study amongst traditional African.
So do the Rastafarians as well, do they include like a strong element of, you know, spirituality in their practice as well?
I would say yes, maybe not in the same way as you would see it in traditional African, because like, so for example, maybe they'll smoke a herb and, you know, they will go to a place where like for I'll give you an example. When I was in Jamaica, because I left the UK to go and live in the Caribbean for about 15 years to live with Rasta. So there's a place called the Bobo Hill, and in Bobo Hill is where it's a spiritual place. You're away from everywhere and you just, you know, within your heavens, within, you know, that spiritual realm. Now there was a Bobo Shanti. He's a particular type of Rasta with, you know, his head locked, and he went to court. He went to court for being for having some herb, which is part of the Rastaman sacrament. And he said to the judge, if you don't release me from the court, 12 o'clock, it was like 10 to 12, there's going to be an earthquake. Now, there was no, you know, from the people in that area, you know, of science, there was never going to be an earthquake. There was nothing like that. And he, at 12 o'clock, and the thing is, it's so funny, the judge who was the judge in the place at the time was my friend's aunt. So it was, we saw it in the newspaper, because it's in the newspaper, and I was doing a magazine at the time and actually took the excerpt to put into the magazine. And my friend said, that's my aunt who that happened to. She was the judge, right? At 12 o'clock, there was a earthquake which shook Kingston at the time, and there was no sign. Nobody could understand that. Now, when I was up in Bubba Hill, I saw the Rast, because one of the other sisters said, that's the brother who caused, you know, because now everyone like, yes, Rast one, you know. And I spoke with him and I said, you know, what happened? How did that happen? And he said, when you tune in to nature, whatever you ask of her, she will give it to you. From you are right with nature. So we know, let me just flip that now in Africa. We know, and even in America, we know that there are certain people who can make the rain fall. If it's dry, they can call in the rain. So they speak to nature and request that. So they will call the rain man. Yeah. So it's that level and what I'm talking about. So at that level, because they were connecting with nature, although there was this Judo-Christian imposition, but the way that they were living their life was very spiritual because they were connecting in that way. I hope that.
Again, baby.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just someone's off mute.
No problem.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I think this is where, I guess, like you said, it's like trying to apply some of those concepts, because that's kind of what faith is. We don't see it these days. It's like, I was speaking to someone the other day and I was saying, someone had said something and I was like, yeah, but I remember in the Bible, when a prophet said, this is going to happen, this happened. You know, when they called on God, like, you know,
that's the one.
I know you're traditional. I don't know if you did read a bit of the Bible. But
I read the Bible from beginning to end twice. Okay. I know my Bible very well.
Okay, all right. So, you know, like where it says, you know, the sun stood still, you know, all those things happened when prophets said it. And I think
Elijah,
sometimes these days, it feels as if, and I could be wrong, but like, we don't see that because Joshua. And like the person said, you know, prophets in those days were kind of on a different level, you know, in terms of how they served, how they worshiped, their entire being. And I think maybe, like you said, with you know, if you're right, like what you're saying, you're right with nature, you're pure. If you say something or call upon it, then it's almost like a mystery, you know, but it is the concept of faith in a way, but it sounds a bit like a mystery.
I see, that's what, if you really want to talk about God, communing with God, nature was created by the Almighty if you believe in God. So when you speak to your father or you speak to your mother, your father will acquiesce for you because you stand right. You are someone who he is proud of, she's proud of. But when you come and use God's name for your own profanities and for your own wealth, you're talking, you're far from it. Far from it.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge we have these days sometimes, unfortunately, you know, kind of thing. But I guess this is where it's when you start to think and understand herbal medicine, and depending on how deep you go, you start to see, you know, because this is the spiritual element. That's why you might go to one herbalist, you know, when it comes to the traditional sense, and you get a result, but you go to the other and you don't. And sometimes it's because of those, you know, the spirituality and those concepts around it, I think, so to speak. Yeah, I think I've been talking a bit, so I don't know if anyone else wants to ask a question now or, you know, make a comment. Anybody? Okay, maybe I know someone was asking about how they can like study herbs without a background, and I know that you run some courses, so maybe you can just talk about.
Do you mind if I just share? Do you mind if I share my screen? Because I have yeah.
I have
So
a
I'll just.
question, please.
Okay.
Oh,
Hello.
hold on, Kandake.
Oh, yes. I'll hold on.
Go ahead, Lawrence.
All right. Thank you very much. I happen to have come across certain videos lately talking about cannabis, particularly. Um, what is your thought about cannabis? Some people say it's a herb, some say it's medicinal. The other person, if I remember rightly, said it's used to heal certain ailments, about 500 or so ailments that cannabis can heal. And if it is medicinal, what is the proportion of the intake that will not be harmful?
Kandake, you can start. You can first, please, because that's something I'm sure you're very familiar with, and I'll
Yes.
add a little bit at the end.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't smoke now. I used to smoke as a Rastafarian many years ago. So, you know, that was part of the sacrament. And it's interesting because when the indentured Indian laborers were brought to the Caribbean, they came with the herb. And so the intermingling between Africans and the Indians, that is where the actual use of herb came amongst Africans in the Caribbean. But it was also used in a lot of the pharaohs. They found things like the opium, the cocaine plant, and the marijuana plant was found there. So we had been used, just like the valerian, which I mentioned, was these plants had been used, but how were they used? You know, they're not used, you know. So now the brother asked, how would you use it? It depends. What are you using it for? You know, for me, one of the reasons why, you know, I didn't want to smoke is that I didn't want smoke to be going into my lungs. I didn't, especially when I started to carry my children, that was it. There was no smoking because I didn't want to harm them. And then if I don't want to harm my children with the herb, I'm not going to smoke it. But we drink it as tea. My grandmother used to drink it as tea. It's a herb. So it's a herb that you use as tea. But then what can happen is when it goes into society, it becomes a recreational drug. So the whole thought behind it is different. When Rasta used a herb, for those who were using it spiritually, it was a connection that they were making with a higher realm. And it's interesting. So let me just say, working with the Dogons, for example, they use the herb. So when we talk about the herb, they use it for people who have gone mad, or, you know, they use it for that way. Now, you would know, Funke, that marijuana is a nervine. You can classify it as a nervine because it works on the nervous system. So there are so many aspects to that plant, just like many others, but it's a very ancient plant, and it depends on what you want to use it for. So when you say how much, if somebody's making some tea, then you might use, you know, a sprig of a leaf or 2 leaves for the tea. I know that the oil has been used for glaucoma. You know, some people, if they've got arthritic conditions or pains in the body, they will use it. It's a nervine. It helps to calm the body down. So are you talking about medicinally? Are you talking about a cup of tea? Again, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think it goes like what I was saying before, like when it comes to herb, it's really important to, you know, speak to someone in the know, because how much you use depends on what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do with it. I think from my point of view, cannabis has been quite hot in the last couple of years. Even within like the pharmacy world, there's been a lot of talk about it. From a scientific point of view, some people, you know, they sell it. There's a lot of people that sell it and say, oh, the research says this, the research says that. I think in my experience, like people use it and it can help you like in terms of just general well-being. Some people that have pain and arthritic conditions find that it helps. However, some people find that the effect wears off over time. And that again, sometimes when you're using herbs, they call it cycling. Sometimes you need to take breaks because your body does get used to it. If you're taking it to get a high, then what you're gonna, how much you're gonna use is gonna be totally different from someone using it in terms of pain, etc. I think it does have its place depending on what you want to use it for. There's something, and I just recently started selling a particular brand. It's, you know, like a little bit of a premium range, but, you know, a lot of athletes, high-placed athletes in the States have used it and said they found it really helps them in terms of recovering from their injuries, you know, enable them to train, you know, better, helping them to like recover quicker, you know, helping them in terms of like the Candice said, in terms of calming down, sleeping better. So it's one of those things. If you have to be careful though, from a science point of view, you've got two parts. You've got the part of the cannabis, the chemicals that can make you high, and the part that can be used more, you know, in terms of general well-being, health and support in terms of arthritis. It's one of those things that I say to people that, you know, if they've tried, because I'll be honest, when it comes to pain, especially chronic pain, it's something we struggle with in practice. You know, the medicines, you know, sometimes it is challenging. People that have pain, and because you don't want to overdose them with painkillers and they get all these nasty side effects, and eventually they become tolerant, so they're still getting the pain and then they're getting all these problems. So I actually say to patients, and last year I did something where I had to take a lot of patients, or at least try to take a lot of patients off things like your opioids, so like your morphine, all those kind of, because I was just like, you know what, this is not working and it's going to give you short-term and long-term side effects, so let's try something else. And you know, so that's where things like cannabis, I feel, is worth trying, you know, taking it to help with some of those conditions. Some people have, you know, I have seen patients that have found it useful. Some people have said that they use it for a while, it stops working. So I think it has a place, because if you've got really bad pain, for example, and, you know, people say it can be used for a range of things, but I'll use pain because that's one of the common uses I think people tend to use it for, although some people use it for general well-being. If you get some relief for a couple of months and your pain, you're able to function by taking something for a few months, even if it stops working and you have to take a break, then to me, that's a good thing, because that's 3 months where someone's been able to, you know, not have as much pain and been able to get out and do regular things kind of thing. And so it might be you have to cycle it, you know, use it for a period, it gives you some relief, then you stop and you use it again. You know, it really does boil down to what you're trying to use it for. And also, again, I go back to the source, because there's a lot of, you know, brands out there that, you know, I mean, the one at the moment, I'm still looking to sell others, but the one that I've chosen at the moment is because I can see the quality, you know, kind of thing. And there's a lot of, you know, brands out there that they put a tiny bit, and then they say it's cannabis and people don't get the effect. But when you look at the quality, it's because the quality is not right. So it's also about the source. But generally speaking, it really depends on what you're trying to do with it. I don't know if that answers your question, Lawrence.
It does. It does.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. Kandake, did you want to just talk briefly about your course?
Yeah, if there's no other questions, I'll just literally okay, let's so can you see the screen?
Slowly.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's a 8-week summer course, and it will cover, so some of the things that we covered there. So like for week 1, we'll look at holistic and traditional modern concepts of health. And we'll go on to understand plants, nutrition, the human body. Then I'll do a full introduction into herbal medicine. Today was just kind of a snippet, but we'll look at that, and then we'll start to go into herbs, understand it more. How can we use it in the systems? And when I spoke about, the different systems. So we'll look at the digestive system. We're going to look at approaches to detoxing, because you hear people talk about detoxing. What does that mean? And how do we deal with that? The importance of sleep and how we can look at sleep, it's a key aspect, because I'm coming at a holistic perspective. So we'll talk about plants, but you're going to see many other things involved, because as a human being, there's different aspects. The immune system, especially during this COVID-19 time, I was, from big word go, like I had herbs, like having to give people herbs. People who had gone to hospital, be turned back, had COVID, didn't know what to do. So, how do you help your immune system to deal with things like COVID-19? If you don't want to take the vaccine, what are you using? So, those kind of things. But generally, how can we help our immune system, which is God-given, which, we have that living in innate intelligence that knows what to do if we can help it. And then the nervous system, stress, we'll look at the science of psychoneuroimmunology, the biological pathways of stress, and how we can use herbs and different aspects to help us through stressful events, So there's that aspect. And then for the women, the women's aspect, if you want to just understand what you can use for heavy periods, for bloating, for PMS, the whole thing. We will be looking at some of those things, endometriosis, fibroids, but we're going to be starting with understanding the female reproductive system, and that allows us to understand ourselves. So those are the 2 courses I'm going to be running. I haven't got the Eventbrite should have been up, came down, and I've got to put it back up. So there is an early bird, and especially if you're on tonight, then you can get the early bird. So I'm going to drop my phone number in there. If you're interested, you can give me a call. If you're interested in the courses, or if there's anything else that you ask, feel free. So I'm going to stop sharing there now. Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome. So does anybody have any other question before we kind of close? Time has gone quick. I can't believe it's already 8 o'clock. But yeah, does anyone have any? Oh, Marcia, go for it.
Are these courses online, or are they face-to-face?
They will be online still, because of the fact that we've just so I've been doing them all year online, and so I'll keep it online until because I don't know what they're going to be doing. But at some point, I'm definitely going to be doing some herbal walks, because it's so important. So I know Funke has her perspective, but for me, people need to understand the herbs that are just there right in front of them that they can use. So going out, that's what I mean. It's only last year I went online. Before that, it was, for the years I've been doing this, it's been, face to face. So I certainly will be looking at doing a herbal walk as well, but this one will be online. So
the herbal walk, is that part of the course? So for example,
no, not on this one, because I need to wait and see what the government is doing. So that's why I've kept it online. And then, we will look at, so I definitely want to get a herbal walk in. It's like, for example, me and some of the herbalists, we're going to go and do a herbal walk, because, we're just going to go out and do our own thing. But when you're taking your people in the community,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that, you know, we're following guidelines and all of that. And I can't really do that yet.
But what I'm asking is I know you say the course is online, but when we're allowed to be out and about, is that going to be incorporated in the course, or obviously the people who've done the course, for example, it would be good if they could go on the walk and see the herbs. So will that be done at a later date as part of the course?
No, it's not. No. That's so I was talking about wanting to do that. That's going to be separate, but the course will be covering many things, but the walk will be separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? And I think just to highlight, because someone was asking whether you have to have a science background, I think if I'm correct, Candike has designed this course is more about, you know, empowering people to be able to manage their own health with, you know, things around them, so to speak, kind of thing. So you don't have to have a science background.
No.
To do the course, so to speak. So is that right, Candike?
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yeah. So if from people who know nothing, I mean, like, for example, the course I just did, there was a guy from the States and his background is in engineering, you know, so, but I've had nurses, I have many nurses actually, they're migrating over, people who know nothing about herbs, people whose parents used to do herbs, you know, to people who are interested. So how it's designed is that, you know, we start from the basics and then we all move forward in that way. So no, you don't need to know, and you can have science background.
And is there a certificate at the end?
I haven't done it for the online. So when I was doing face-to-face, I'd do the certificate, you know, for people who were there. I haven't done it on the online. People haven't asked actually.
Okay.
But
is it something you could do if someone wanted it?
Yes, because I was doing it before. Yeah,
kind of thing. So that can be done if you wanted that.
That's right.
So we're gonna bring the session to an end. I just want to thank everyone for attending and thank Candike as well for her time and effort. I do these things and, you know, like everybody volunteers their time and effort. So I hope it was useful. And I think just to summarize, I think it was quite insightful. And I think it's really important that we embrace our history. There is a place for it. And I think, you know, the WHO actually, just to highlight, the World Health Organization actually endorses the use of herbs and actually, you know, encourages it, just because yes, we're fortunate in this country that we have a public health system, but there are many countries in the world where cost is an issue when it comes to pharmaceuticals. So their only option is to go natural. So there's a lot of policies in other countries, and WHO has been encouraging that, because then it's about how do we make sure we're using this safely. And I think for me as an African, I think it's important that we build on what we know. You know, we learn from those before us and we build on the good things. But I think it's important that we don't neglect science and we try and marry the two and get the best of both worlds. And that's how I see it personally. That's why in my practice, I've decided to embrace herbalism and take what I can, the good things, in order to make sure the patients that I work with are getting the best. And so, yeah, so that's how I see it. And so I would encourage you, from a safety point of view, just to engage, even with someone like Candike, who's a herbalist but works with mainstream practitioners, someone like myself. I just want people to do it safely and to make sure people get the results they want. And because I 9 out of 10 times when people say a medication doesn't work, or they want to go down herbal route and they don't think about the safety aspect, that's when people get hurt. So for me, safety is vital, and that safety will come by working with the right people. So that's kind of, where I would like, I don't know if you have a closing word, Candike?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just to add, so I'd like to say, that's why when I made reference to the title, Herbal Medicine v Pharmaceuticals, there are times when someone can come to me, and if I see that the state that they're in is critical, I will not give them herbs. I'm going to send them to the hospital or to the doctor, because herbs take time. And I've done that before with people whose blood pressure has just been off the roof. I'm like, I'm not giving you any herbs. You need to go and get that blood pressure down now, because I can give them the herb. They, on the way home, they drop and go. I'm not going to take that responsibility. My job is to preserve life. And so the pharmaceutical does have its place, you know, so
it's like
don't get me wrong, it has its place.
It's like, that's why I said I see herbs as really helpful when it comes to maintaining health and well-being. But in terms of potency, if you're on death's doorstep, or you've just had an accident, or your blood pressure sky high, then you need, because herbs are gentle. They're gentle in effect. They work well over time in terms of maintaining your body and your health. But sometimes you need something that's just going to quickly fix what you have, and then you carry on from there. So
what we say, you know, is like,
practitioner.
Yeah, if you know, heaven forbid, you go out there and get hit down by a car, don't come and offer me a cup of tea. Get me to the hospital, right? Get me to the hospital, right? So we just keep it real. We just keep it real. So I want to say thank you, Funke. I think it's been really good, and I think it's really good, you know, speaking with persons like yourself who, you know, is looking to bridge that gap, and you know, myself working with other doctors who have that open-mindedness and, you know, understand it's not us and them. There's no place for it, because at the end of the day, it's you, it's the person who comes to see you, it's their life, and it's whatever can preserve that life and help us. That's what it's about.
That definitely is. And I think there just needs to be more connections with mainstream, with people like yourself. I think that's the only way, you know, we're gonna get the best out of both worlds, by working together. So I thank you. I know from the first day I spoke to you, you're just one of those people that is just easy to connect with and talk with, kind of thing. And for me, even with what I do, it's important that I have an ecosystem of specialists around me so that I can give patients the best I can. So, and that includes herbalists, like I've got other sort of alternative practitioners as well that I might bring to the forum as well, with people like yourself and other people. I try to get a balance, because I feel healthcare is about teamwork, you know, of giving people the best. So thank you again, Kandake, and thank you all for attending. We've put our details on the chat, so I'll leave them for a few minutes in case anyone hasn't gotten it. And yeah, just contact myself or Kandake if you've got any more questions or needs. All right then, thank you guys. Thank you, Kandake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Where's your details?
Oh, I did put it.
What am I looking for?
Wesie, W-E-S-I-E. I'll type it again for you.
Wesie OAP?
I'll type it in the chat bot again. Oh, it's not letting me copy it, so let me. So that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. So I'm going to close the chat now. Thank you again for attending, and just follow us on social media if you want to stay up to date with other events that we do. All right, then take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.